the station wagon. Much loved by us here at RPM and a lot of people in Europe. But most of the South African car-buying public don't share that enthusiasm, and that's despite the fact that there are cars like the Volvo V60 cross-country that have decent space and can go just about anywhere that every other SUV will go. A lot of money goes into the R&D for developing SUVs, and yet not a lot of their owners will find out just how well that R&D budget has been spent. Occasionally, a dirt road might be encountered or a trailer might be hitched, but generally speaking, they are driven like regular cars amongst regular cars. And that's what makes the idea behind the V60 cross-country ingenious. Back in the late 90s, Volvo figured they might encounter some success by giving one of their cars with more than average space, like their V70 station wagon, the ability to tackle less than perfect roads. And that's where the cross-country idea started. And it turned out to be a very good idea, with the XC70, the original, being one of the brand's best-selling cars at the time. And it also spawned a whole new class of cars. And those cars are easy to identify. They look like common or garden variety cars, but have either a raised ride height or some form of scuff protection or plastic cladding on the bodywork. The actual off-road ability of these cars varies, as is obvious by the fact that your choices range from the tiny Toyota Etios Cross to this 533,000 Rand Volvo. The starting point for this car was the very stylish V60, but when creating this version, all that Swedish minimalism seems to have gone to the designer's head. Previous generations of this car have all been overtly cross-country-ish, but all the indications that this car has a dirt-loving drive are, well, minimal. Where there used to be a lot of body protection, there are now just very slight covers for the wheel arches. Scuff protection has been elegantly included in the form of silver inserts that look more style-conscious than safari-ready. The most obvious clues, which aren't that obvious to the casual eye, is the raised ride height. The optional 19-inch wheels are more likely to catch your attention when looking at that area of the car. It's not an unattractive machine, but it's very understated, and for me that's a pity. The off-road ready look of these cars conveys a real attitude that adds to their personality, and that just isn't a part of this package. So while the styling might have taken a bit of a step backwards while trying to go forwards, the interior is the complete opposite. If you've driven any Volvo station wagon in the last 5 to 8 years, there will be a lot in here that is familiar. So it's comfortable, it's well laid out, but at the same time it is thoroughly modernized. Even the floating center stack, something I've said for a long time should be replaced, seems to work in here. It's home to a lot of the car's controls, which means there are a lot more buttons than should be allowed in a car from this side of 2010, but even that doesn't seem to detract from the overall impression. Rear space is good, despite this being the smallest amongst its direct competition. The boot is less impressive though, thanks in part to its shallow load floor. The drivetrain lineup for the Volvo V60 Cross Country is short. There's only one gearbox option, being a 6-speed automatic, and there are only 2 engine options, both V5 turbos. One is a 2.5 petrol, the other is the 2.5 diesel, which is what we're driving. Its 140 kilowatts and 450 newton meters feel okay, but it's not the most enthusiastic thing around, which can be frustrating when you want a quick burst of power for an overtake. I'd say that has to do more with the gearbox than anything else though. In those situations, it always feels like it's winding itself up before delivering the acceleration, rather than responding with a little more urgency. In our week with the V60, we struggled to match Volvo's fuel consumption claims. In fact, struggled is an understatement. Their figures come in at 5.7 litres per 100 Ks, but we didn't see anything less than 10.1. That lack of instant power and apparent thirst is balanced out by a brilliant 5-cylinder soundtrack and a very good ride setup. Raising the suspension by 65mm has done nothing to take away from this car's on-road ability, and helping out off-road is all-wheel drive and not much else. There's no selectable off-road driving mode or active suspension, but there's also no need for them. The 4-wheel drive confidence of the V60 Cross Country is impressive, keeping things tidy on loose surfaces, while the suspension does a good job of soaking up the bumps. On an average dirt road, this car feels as sure-footed as any SUV, plus it looks better than most of them. If you are in the market for a station wagon that can get a bit adventurous, your choices are fairly limited. There is this car, the Audi A4 Allroad, and the Subaru Outback. And although the Volvo has the least amount of space, it also has the second best ground clearance and the most power and torque and the best value with this top-of-the-range version costing 10 grand less than all the others. I just wish it had a bit more off-road attitude and a more enthusiastic drive. The V5 turbo diesel in the V60 Cross Country has the most power in its very limited class. It sounds good but doesn't deliver with a lot of urgency, thanks in part to an underwhelming 6-speed auto gearbox. It may not have the most overt off-road styling, but it's still a good-looking and well-spec'd machine. It also offers good value despite its interior being the smallest in its class.